This is the first official interview for Surviving SCA, so if you want to just take some time to introduce yourself and just kind of say your name, your age, and just take us through what happened.
Yeah, so my name is Meredith Nelson-Uram. I live in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and I am now 35 years old. My event happened when I was 34. I had just given birth to my second son. I gave birth to my son Nash on November 7th of 2019. And a week later, on November 14th, very early in the morning, I had fed Nash around probably 3 o'clock in the morning. And then around 6 o'clock, I was laying in bed next to my husband, and he thought I was snoring. I was making a lot of noise. And he kind of reached over, and he realized I wasn't breathing. And so he immediately jumped up, and my mother was still here actually staying with us to take care of the baby. And so he ran down to get my mom and said something to the effect of, "Laura, you need to come up here and help. I think Meredith's having a seizure or something." And they immediately called 911, ran upstairs, and the 911 dispatcher began talking them through CPR and chest compressions. And so they did that for 4 minutes before the first responders arrived. Then the first responders took over. They were from a fire station just down the street from us, actually. And then the paramedics arrived shortly thereafter. They used an AED on me twice. They shocked me twice and got me back breathing and loaded me onto a gurney. And we have a very old, very small house. I don't know how they maneuvered the gurney down the stairs and got me out into the ambulance. My husband quickly got a bottle ready for the 7-day-old baby who had never had a bottle before, and put me into the ambulance. And when we got to the hospital, we went to Fairview Southdale, a hospital here in Edina, Minnesota, really close to where we live. They do a fantastic job in terms of cardiac care. And they immediately cooled me down and put me into sort of the medically induced coma state of hypothermia for 24 hours. And then brought me out of it about 24 hours later. And I began my recovery process there. So, they had kind of warned my family that they didn't know how long I'd been without oxygen. They didn't know what sort of state my brain would be in. They warned that my, memory might not be right. I might not know who I was, those sorts of things. So when they pulled me out, they warmed me back up essentially. They asked me my name and my birth date, and I told them Meredith Uram, 12/23/84, and my family was like, "Oh my gosh, she's okay." And then I started saying really crazy things and was not very normal for a little while. So I don't recall any of that. I don't recall the event. I probably remember feeding my son at 3 o'clock in the morning, but when you have a newborn baby, you don't know the hours of the day. And so I don't remember much of my time in the hospital. So that happened on a Thursday. I probably started having memories, very kind of faint memories, on Saturday-ish. And then more clearly remember Sunday. I was in the hospital for 6 days and then came home. So here I am.
Everything turned out all right, first of all, because, it's always the people by you that end up saving you, because, after you go into sudden cardiac arrest, that's what you need. You need somebody to witness it. And unfortunately, it doesn't happen to that many people, and it just goes by unnoticed. So I'm glad that your husband kind of knew what to do and started CPR, because clearly it worked.
Yeah.
So I know that gasping and grunting is something that happens in a lot of sudden cardiac arrest patients, and I know you probably don't remember, like you said, but does your husband know if you had any symptoms before, like any shortness of breath or anything like that? Like, were you feeling off, or was everything perfectly fine?
Yeah, I felt like I lived a very normal life, and I felt very normal up until the day it happened. I was a college athlete, so I played volleyball at the University of Minnesota, and never had any issues. Atrial fibrillation runs in my family. So I had a couple of sort of tests here and there, EKGs, that showed nothing. And I never really felt like that was an issue or a problem. While I was in the hospital after the birth of my son, so I was in the hospital for a few days after the birth of my son, and there was one night where the nurses noticed my heart rate just kind of being irregular, but nothing that really caused any concern, and certainly wasn't VFib or anything like that. They just sort of said, hey, your heart rate was kind of, it was a bit of arrhythmia in the middle of the night, you know. I said, well, AFib runs in my family, but we thought nothing of it. So really no symptoms, nothing leading up to it. And, you know, 7 days postpartum after you have a baby, like your whole body is a mess. So like, you know, but I didn't feel different than I felt when I had my first son either. So we certainly, for us, it came out of nowhere.
You know,
Yeah, I mean, it's hard, right? Like, so I had I guess while I was in the hospital for those, whatever, 6 days post-event, they ran every test known to man. I mean, right? Like, I'm sure you have the same thing. It's EKG, EEG, angiogram, CT scan, MRI, like anything that they could possibly test me for. I had some genetic testing done too. And there's nothing that indicates why this happened to me. I'm a very healthy, kind of functioning, high functioning adult. Just happened.
yeah, no, it was, I mean, I guess it was the same for me. We did a lot of genetic testing. My whole family got blood drawn to see if it came from my mom's side, my dad's side, the whole family tree, and nothing. It just, I mean, I did live with arrhythmia, but it wasn't that. So it's kind of like a little bit unsettling not knowing, like if it was exercise or something like that.
Yeah.
I know after you were in the medical induced coma, you probably don't remember most of that, but there had to be some sort of recovery going on after that, because your body doesn't just pop up. And especially after having a baby, that's just like more added weight. So what was kind of your recovery process like?
It's, you know, in some regards, well, I should say that, you know, when you have a baby, you like don't sleep because the baby's waking up every few hours to eat. And so I was actually like, hey, I don't care that I can't sleep because I'm here. This is great. So it did put things in perspective for me. Yeah, I mean, my recovery was, it was actually pretty quick. So in the hospital, I was doing sort of the traditional type rehab type things, walking the floor, all of that good stuff that you're doing. I do have a device. I know you have a device too, Julieta. So they implanted the device probably 5 days post-event, something like that, 6 days post-event. And so, you know, I think the recovery process for me was sort of like, I was already going to be sitting at home a lot with my baby, bonding with my baby. And this just certainly reinforced that. I saw a lot of different specialists. Obviously, you sort of have that battery of appointments after you're released from the hospital. So talking with electrophysiologists and cardiologists, and I did go see a couple of like neuro specialists to ensure that my brain was functioning well and was healing and coming back. And then, you know, primary care physicians and everything that you could possibly, plus then all the baby's appointments. I was like at the doctor for 3 months straight. And throughout that, the doctors just kind of spoke to me, you know, about how to live, what to do. My memory came back pretty quickly, with the exception of those 5 or 6 days. I still have trouble here and there kind of placing a word. It just doesn't come to me as fast as it normally would, or what I thought it normally would have. And then of course the physical recovery, I laid low for a really long time, until I had my stress test and was given clearance to start working out. So had my stress test, I suppose it was 7 or 8 weeks post implant, something like that. I want to say it was pretty quick after. I was itching to get back working out because I'm an athlete. That's what I'm used to. Had the stress test done, was given clearance. And so then just very slowly started working out, and did a few kind of like postpartum type classes, and started working my way up. And now I work out every day. I do high intensity interval training. We have a Peloton. I get on the bike all the time. I work out almost every day, and feel really quite wonderful. You know, they're monitoring us consistently, always, with this device. So every 3 months or so, I have a device check where they talk to me about what they saw on the device that, you know, that during that time period, which is so creepy. It's so weird. So they know when I'm working out too. They're keeping me accountable. But yeah, my recovery was actually really quite fast. And now I live life very normally. When I'm working out, I do monitor my heart rate pretty carefully, just to make sure that, you know, when I'm in sort of that zone, I know what's going on and I'm not pushing myself too hard. But overall, it was a pretty fast recovery, and I'm incredibly thankful for the medical care that I received. These doctors are amazing.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm glad that you had such a great physical recovery. I mean, 7 to 8 weeks after, I mean, I didn't even think you could even ask for a stress test that early. So, I mean, that just goes to show, like, your body did survive and get through this. And I mean, now you're all fine. But another thing that I wanted to ask you about was something that I researched while I was just looking on the internet about sudden cardiac arrest. I didn't know how hard it hit, like, mentally. Like, physically is a different realm, but how was your recovery process mentally? Because I feel like I struggled with that a lot more than I did with the physical aspect. So did you suffer from any sort of depression? Because I think it's either 86 or 83% do. So
yeah, it's one of the things I think I was not prepared for either. You know, like, I was like, I gotta, you know, I can't even walk right now. I gotta figure out my health, my physical health, but the mental health piece of it, I think, is often overlooked and is a really big deal. And so I probably, my goodness, maybe 4-ish weeks out from my events, I had one of my checkups actually with my OB. And, you know, obviously after you have a baby, there's a very heightened sense of sort of mental health awareness, and they're doing a lot of testing to test for postpartum anxiety and postpartum depression. And so through that testing, in addition to, you know, my family had called her as well when this happened. And so she was sort of all along with us this whole journey. And so knowing that had happened, she had been in contact with my other physicians. We decided it was probably best for me to go on a low dose of an antidepressant, anti-anxiety type medication. So I have been on that since probably, I think it's about 3 or 4 weeks post-event, maybe 5, I don't know. And that has been incredibly helpful to me. I think it just makes me feel more like myself, and I think it makes me feel like more balanced, I guess, is maybe the way I would say it. You know, it's hard to say, is it more helpful for me from a postpartum depression perspective or from depression due to the cardiac arrest, the sudden cardiac arrest? Either way, I think it was the right decision for me and my family. And I think it's something that people need to talk about, because, you know, it's important. And if it makes me feel normal again, and if it makes me feel like I'm balanced and that I can go throughout my life, I mean, I'm a mom of 2, I have a job, like, you know, I need to be able to function like I normally do. And so I'm super thankful for that. I'm still on the medications. The plan is to assess after a year, see how I'm doing, if I want to continue or if I don't want to continue, but we felt like it was the right decision. And for me, I think it certainly was. I think, you know, you and I had begun talking before we started interviewing. There are days where you're like, okay, I can live a normal life. I don't think about it. There are days now where I don't think about it anymore. But there are days where I'm like, well, why am I still here? Like, why was I chosen why did God choose me to live? Not that I don't want to live, but just like, why? There must be a bigger purpose here. There must be a reason I'm here. And so I think to be able to know, like, I'm one of a very small percentage of people who lives through this, and that's for a very specific reason, and I'm still figuring out what that reason is. But I feel incredibly blessed. I feel incredibly lucky, and I think making sure that my mental health is in the right spot has been a really important part of my recovery.
Well, I mean, I'm really happy that you got that care, because I know it's, like you said, it's often overlooked. It's kind of like you focus on things that are tangible and that you can see, but you don't really see what's going on in somebody's head, especially after, I mean, you went through kind of like a double whammy. So,
Yeah.
I mean, it's absolutely crazy. I had a lot of people reach out like you that helped me a lot. But there was this one woman in Austin that reached out, and her daughter played volleyball, and she had her sudden cardiac arrest, and she didn't make it. And that took me for a whirlwind. Like the same question, why me? Like, her daughter deserved to have a regular life, 'cause she was my age whenever she got. So her daughter deserved to live out the rest of her life like I did. Like, why me? And all these questions just kind of keep on piling up. So hopefully I'll get some answers later on.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's, like as you go through life, you'll get answers. I think what you're doing right now is one of the reasons, right? Like, this is building a website and having a resource for people who go through this, and for families who go through this. I mean, I think that's one of the other things that people don't talk about is the caretakers. And you talked about it. The person right next to you is the person who oftentimes needs to save you. Your sister, right, did it for you, and my husband did it for me. And I think this is almost as hard on them as, if not harder, right? Like, I don't remember that whole story I told you about my event. My husband remembers every single detail. And so for my husband and my mother and my immediate family that was near, for them who saw you on the ventilator and, barely hanging on and in a coma, I think it's incredibly hard for caretakers and for family members too. And so we need to be looking out for their mental health as well.
Yeah, I know we kind of struggled with that, and we had to see kind of some therapists, because my mom and my sister, it was, I think it actually kind of hit them harder than it did to me.
Right.
And we couldn't even go to our upstairs part of our house, and they couldn't just let me go in a separate room, because like little things like that. And you understand why they got paranoia, but you really normally only focus on like the victim, but everybody else is so affected by
That's
it.
right. That's right.
It's like so many memories, and I don't really cry or get emotional about it because I don't remember, but the people that do, is crazy.
Yeah.
But a year, you've had this, like, you've been in recovery for a year now, right? So you're
almost 9 months. Yeah.
9 months.
Yeah.
So now that you've had some time to kind of like look at it, hindsight, how do you feel like it changed your life? Like, for the better, for the worse? I know there's some people that, I think I had mentioned this earlier before we started officially recording this, and there are some people that definitely had some underlying conditions or like paralysis, and I feel like they wouldn't have the same answer as you and I would.
Right.
So how do you feel like it has changed your life in general?
Yeah, I mean, I think most days I feel like I try to live a pretty normal life, like I did, pre-event, but I think I have a different outlook on things that happened to me. And I think about a few things. Like, the first thing I think about is everyone should be informed and trained in CPR and chest compressions. Like, it's something that is easy to do, but most people don't do it, and that literally can save a life. I think I read a stat somewhere, maybe you've seen this one, Julieta, that of people who, have a sudden cardiac arrest outside of a hospital setting, only 6% of those people live. And something like, if someone is nearby to perform chest compressions and CPR, that number doubles to like 12% or something like that. And so I think the first thing that I think about is like, we need to be looking out for one another. It's something that's right to do, is to be trained and be aware and know how to do chest compressions and CPR. And so I am like big on this kick of everyone go learn if you don't know yet. And thank goodness for 911 operators and dispatchers that can also help families who are going through this. The second thing I think about is I felt like I lived a very grateful life before. I felt like I've had a very easy, privileged life, and I felt very grateful and blessed. But when you're one of 6%, you can't help but think about how blessed you are and how grateful you should be. And I was in an appointment, a follow-up appointment with one of my electrophysiologists, and I said, I'm feeling great. I just feel really, really lucky. And he said, well, Meredith, you were incredibly lucky and incredibly unlucky all at the same time, right? This happened to you, which is very unlucky, but the fact that you made it is very lucky. And I'm like, yeah, I just don't see myself as unlucky. Like, it's just not how I choose to look at myself because of this event. I don't choose to look at myself or feel bad for myself. I just sheerly look at this as a way to be grateful and have gratitude. And like you had so many people reach out to you, and I was connected to you through the volleyball world. We had the same thing, and my family had the same thing. And that you have built a strong community, and I was lucky enough to grow up in a small town with a really tight community, but that community really comes through in times of need. And the amount of cards and prayers and love and calls that I received from that network, and then the same amount of calls and prayers and love that my family received from that network. Like, I'm incredibly grateful, and I feel so fortunate to have these incredible people in my life. And then the last thing is, I've always been an optimist. I've always considered myself an optimist. I feel like, I don't know, for me as an athlete, like, I have to be an optimist because you can't put yourself and your body through what you put it through every single day to not, think something great's going to come. But I really choose to see the good in things and believe in the good and believe in a future good. My mom and I talk about this. She has said to me for a long time, well, Meredith, good always comes from bad. And we certainly, for sure, saw that related to my event. I mean, one of the very simple good things that came of it was I was unable to drive then well, you don't even drive yet, do you, Julieta? Oh my gosh. Okay, so I drive. so I was not able to drive for the first 90 days after the event. And the rationale for that is that usually if another event is going to occur, it's most likely to occur in those first 90 days. And so my husband works, and my husband was working and was having to travel for work and those types of things. And so my mom came down and stayed with me and with my two boys while my husband was away, or even when my husband was here working, just to help out and to drive me places, drive me to my workouts, drive me to my doctor appointments, drive me to the grocery store. I also took a lot of Ubers then. But my mom and I haven't spent that much time together since I moved out of their house when I was 18 years old. And so having her around and staying with us was just a wonderful, very, very special time. And it was incredibly special for her to watch my youngest sort of grow. And so they got to sort of share in that with us, and the magic and wonder of a newborn baby. And so I think there's just a million different things that I could point to, this notion that good always comes from bad. And so I guess, like, I always felt like I had a great outlook on life, but I probably feel even more gratitude every day. And I probably feel even more optimism every day.
I mean, that's great. I know it's really hard, although you make it sound really easy. For most people, it's really hard to just even kind of like have that maturity to look at it that way.
Yeah.
It took me a little bit. I mean, that's precisely what I wanted to talk to people like you, that like life gets better. Like there's still a lot of hope for people if you've gone through this. Like there's always good that comes from bad.
Yeah. I mean, it hasn't all been rainbows and gumdrops for sure. Like there are days, right, like that it's just really hard, or there are days where, you just can't get it going, or, I mean, like after the birth of my son, I had the cardiac arrest. My grandfather passed away only 3 weeks later. I had a really bad year at work, just a bad business year. Like our numbers weren't good. And I'm like, you know what, this has been a bad year other than my son being born. I'd like to, and then coronavirus, like I'd like to, move forward. But it does get better. It will get better. Especially when you have a network of people around you, and finding finding the people that will be by your side, I think has been an incredible help for me.
Yeah, no, I mean, I was blessed to pick the sport of volleyball because they really know how to come through.
That's right. That's right.
But now that you've had this experience, I know, like, especially as a 6-year-old, like, for me at least, I never thought, even though I had arrhythmia, I never thought that sudden cardiac arrest was a thing. I thought that sudden cardiac arrest, stroke, and like heart attack were all like just different names for the same condition. And
Right.
they're completely different.
Right.
So now that you're a little more educated and like know kind of what it is at least,
Mm-hmm.
what is something that you have like learned regarding SCA that you didn't know before that is like a complete misconception?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first one is that it's a heart attack, right? Like everyone's like, oh, you had a heart attack. I'm like, no, I didn't though. So, I think I've begun to understand, I don't know, the idea that there are many, many, many different things that go on in your heart. And there are many, many different conditions that, that happen to people related to, cardiac health. But I think we need to continue to raise awareness, so that people know what to do if it's something happens to somebody, right? But also so that we can have resources for families who have gone, who are going through this, right? Like my parents were in the hospital with me in the ICU, and they were like, we don't know anything about this. We don't know who to turn to. We don't know. And my parents are like bright, smart people, right? But we didn't have anyone for them to talk to say, okay, what's she going to be like? Or how will she recover? Or will she even live? Will she recover, right? Because you hear so many different stories. So I think continuing to raise awareness like you're doing right now and helping people understand what sudden cardiac arrest is and why that's different than heart attack and why it's different than, AFib is different than VFib, right? All these different things that you learn. I think also there's just a lot more work to be done, I think, as it relates to women and cardiac health. Immediately when this happened, because I had just had a baby, they thought it was SCAD. No, it wasn't, right? So I think there's a lot more to learn about women and women's hearts specifically. Not that this doesn't happen to men, but I think there are probably more differences between women's hearts and men's hearts than we know.
Of course, you've reached out to me and my family, and you brought great comfort, honestly. For someone who plays volleyball, is an athlete, and a girl, and went through this recently, I think you gave my dad a lot of hope whenever he talked to you, and he kind of assured us that it was going to be okay.
Yeah.
But what is something you would say to another sudden cardiac arrest patient that's going through this or like just got out of it whenever you're kind of like unsure of what just happened?
I would tell them to have conversations, have people by your side, make sure that you are exercising your brain to the best that you can by talking, holding conversation, engaging with folks, but also to take care of your mental health. I think, the doctors are really, really, really fantastic at taking care of you and making sure from a physical health perspective, if you're able to recover physically, certainly there can be complications and many people experience those types of things, but without your mental health, I don't think your physical health really matters. And so making sure that you have people surrounding you to be with you and check in on you and make sure that you're okay. My mom being with me every day, or for a lot of days shortly after the event, was to help me with the baby, but it was also to help me. And to help her, frankly. She was there when it happened. And so, to watch me recover and watch me, improve a little bit every day, I think was important. So I would probably say the number one thing I would want people to focus on if this happened to you is to just start immediately making sure that you have a network of people to talk to, to recover with, and to make sure that they're keeping an eye on you, a really close, you said it earlier, people keep a really close eye on you after this happens. I fell asleep on the couch one time I fall asleep watching movies all the time. People are like, what's your favorite movie? I'm like, I don't know. I've never watched a full one because I fall asleep all the time. But I had fallen asleep watching a movie on the couch next to my husband one night. he kind of said, "Hey, Mary, let's go to bed or whatever," to wake me up. And I didn't wake up because I'm a very hard sleeper. And he immediately was like, you know, and shook me. It was like, Meredith. And, you know, I was fine. But, you know, that sort of, you talked about this, like your family wanting to be with you. So like making sure somebody's there to check on you is probably the number one piece of advice I would give people. Do you agree? What would you say, Julia? That's a good question.
No, for sure. In the hospital, well, I went through this during COVID, and my dad was in Mexico, my brother was in Mexico, my whole family was just kind of everywhere. So it was super unexpected, and basically just super unexpected. Like I never thought that something would happen to me.
Right.
So probably having my mom there throughout all of it, because I mean, hospitals are scary, at least for me. Like
Totally.
getting shots, I hated doing all that jazz, and going from crying before I got a shot to crying whenever I had to get like a tube down my throat was
right. Right.
Having my mom there as support and kind of like and knowing that I helped her too, because now she has we both have the same arrhythmia, and so now she has an ICD as well. So I've kind of seeing her and her mental progress with all of this, because she watched it all happen. She was giving me and doing all that. So kind of watching us like both grow out of this together, and now we both have the same matching scar, and so
totally.
I think all my family helped, but I think my mom was probably like the MVP throughout all of it. She stayed with me through all the sleepless nights, the months in the hospital. So I mean, I think that's what really helped me pull through. And she was stronger than anybody probably ever would in that kind of situation. So
totally.
She helped me a lot. She was my rock. So now that you've gone through all of this, and of course we are both very lucky to have someone that kind of reacted quickly. And even though like in my instance, like they thought that I was having a seizure like you did, but my mom just didn't know what to do, and she just started CPR. So what is something that you wish more people knew to like raise awareness? I think for me, I would probably say CPR. I bet you probably feel the same, because I mean that's what ended up saving my life until the paramedics came. So
yeah, I mean for sure CPR. I think you know, like especially the sort of chest compression portion of it. I think people knowing how to do that and to maintain a calm head about it. Like I don't know how my husband is very calm in times of turmoil, and I'm like, and normally he's like pretty high energy, pretty, you know, like excitable, but in times of chaos, I think both he and my mom just like immediately were super calm and knew what to do. And CPR, I think, is the number one thing, you know, people should know for sure.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's why we're both here today. So I'm really,
that's right.
That's what probably all of this is for, to advocate for that specifically. And of course for AEDs, because I mean, your heart can't start up with CPR.
That's right. That's right.
Now, I know you mentioned your mom and your husband, but is there anyone else that you're especially thankful for or want to give thanks to? Because, I mean, it really, like you said, it takes the whole community. It takes everybody around you to kind of give you that strength when you don't necessarily have it for yourself. So anybody that you want to give a special thanks to?
Yeah, I mean, so you, by the way, you raise a good point about AEDs too. Like knowing where an AED is incredibly important. If, you know, the paramedics can bring them, but, you know, in office buildings and schools and churches and wherever else, knowing where those defibrillators are is super important. So, yeah, in terms of thanks, obviously, like my husband is my number one. He always has been, but he for sure wins Husband of the Year for this one. Like his calm head, his calm demeanor. I had to go back to the emergency room a couple of months after my event for something, just being extra cautious and making sure I was okay. And the emergency room physician who was working when I was brought in, when I was admitted, was working that day. And he found out I was there. And so he came in, he said, I was the doctor who worked on you when you came in the emergency room? You probably don't remember me, but I remember you. And I was like, oh my gosh, and Nick, my husband, said, yeah, I remember you very well. And the doctor said, I remember you, and you were very calm and helpful. And Nick was like, did you hear that? You told me I was calm and helpful. But so I was incredibly thankful to meet the doctor that day. That was incredible. My husband, my mother, obviously were there with us. And immediate family rushed right in. My dad drove, he was driving up north, and he turned right around, came down, and they obviously, with the help of my in-laws, Nick and Luann, helped care for my boys. While Nick and I were in the hospital, Nick stayed by my side the entire time in the hospital. So they cared for our sons. Of course, the village, the family, the paramedics. I'm incredibly thankful to them. I actually, 2 months post-event, went and got donuts from a local store and brought 24 donuts to the fire station where the dispatcher, the original sort of emergency personnel came from. And I said, I know you don't know me, but you all saved my life 2 months ago. Like, here's some donuts. Like, thank you. So I think like emergency personnel, just absolutely incredible. And then, I think I talk about my coworkers and my family and my friends and my dear friends, my teammates. And then one very special coworker, his name's Chip, was in town. He actually works for me, and he was in town. My husband and I have known him for a long time. He was in town for something for work, and this happened, and he stayed to be with us and to be especially with my husband. He was in the emergency room with my husband while they were working on me. And so for him to be a resource for my husband when my husband was being a resource for me was incredibly special for us.
Amazing support system, it sounds like. And I did the same with the donuts, just with cupcakes. So
there you go, right? You're like, I don't know, it's not enough, but here's something to say thank you.
I was glad that they took it with everything going on with COVID. Hopefully they ignored them. But yeah, I didn't know what else to say other than thank you for doing 30 minutes of CPR.
Yeah, right. Like, you're like, I don't know what to get you, so please enjoy a baked good.
But I'm especially glad that, we're both here today. I think that's the number one thing, that we're safe and we're healthy. And you still get to be a part of your boys' lives. So, I'm really glad that you reached out and then we got to do this. And that hopefully many more people will see this and kind of just get a little bit of hope, because I think you're the most positive person I will ever interview. So if anybody needs a little boost, I think this one is it.
I'm happy to be that boost for anybody who will use it. And I continue to be impressed by you, Julieta. You are amazing. You are a miracle, and you are incredible. And I'm so impressed by you and honored to be able to talk to you.
Thank you so much. I'm really glad that you agreed to do this. And we're both part of that small percentage. So I think that this is a little sticker on the forehead. Yeah.